Hello, my name is Sky Marchand. Welcome to my Psych 333 Personality Theory Final Term Project. The character I've chosen for my term project is Severus Snape from Harry Potter, a series of fantasy novels written by J.K. Rowling, an author who has definitely never done anything uncool or weird or transphobic to tarnish her name and legacy forever. Just don't look that up. Snape is an emotionally complex and troubled character, and his backstory and true intentions are revealed near the end of the seventh and final novel. I'll be taking primarily from the books. The movies have the general information, but it lacks the detail and the nuance that the books have. However, I will be borrowing images from the films. Some brief exposition before we get started. This is a world of magic, witches and wizards, magical creatures, a school of magic called Hogwarts, and an evil wizard named Voldemort, who is the leader of a group called the Death Eaters. The Death Eaters aim to establish Voldemort as a totalitarian supreme leader. Voldemort's movement is based on purity, pureblood supremacy, and the oppression and even extermination of non-magic people called Muggles. Death Eaters have a negative term, or a slur, for Muggles, which is mudblood, meaning dirty blood. His movement is supposed to mirror colonialism, racism, fear of the other, with the mixing of Muggle and magical blood considered a form of betrayal to your kind. It's seen as a mongrelization or a disgusting hybridity. I believe this exposition is important because it provides insight into the social pressures that Snape faced while he was at school. Snape's father was a Muggle and abusive to both wife and son. His mother, described by Harry as appearing sullen, sour-faced, and passive, was a pureblood, meaning no Muggle heritage, and she was an extremely talented witch. Snape also grew up in extreme poverty, and young Snape was described as being skinny with overlong black hair, and wore shabby, mismatched, and ill-fitting clothing. This description implies a level of neglect and lack of attention, particularly the hair being described as overlong instead of just long. This supports a theory of a lack of nurturing and care from both mother and father. Snape meets Lily, a Muggle-born witch, as children, and falls in love with her. She was one of the only people to ever show him kindness and friendship. When they go to Hogwarts, Snape and Lily are placed into different houses, which are essentially personality-based dorms. Snape is housed in Slytherin, a house that's notorious for its general hatred, distaste, and prejudice towards Muggles. They regularly use the slur mudblood when talking about Muggleborns. It's during this time at school when Voldemort is rising to power for the first time. Snape is bullied at school, but also bullies and torments other students, most notably James Potter. Fast forward a few years, James and Lily are married with a child, and Snape is still in love with Lily, but he's joined the Death Eaters. Snape provides Voldemort with intel that leads to James and Lily being murdered by Voldemort, leaving their son, Harry, behind as the sole survivor. Snape didn't intend for Lily to be caught in the crossfire, and the guilt of his actions ultimately leads him to switch sides and become a double agent for the good side. And he spends the rest of his life trying to make up for getting Lily killed by looking out for her son. The themes of neglect, social pressure, unrequited love, rage and humiliation, and extreme guilt continue from childhood and into adulthood. That brings us to our first theory. Freud's psychoanalytic theory suggests that our personalities are shaped by unresolved unconscious conflicts and our childhood experiences, and is driven by three components called the id, the ego, and the superego. The id is an amoral, unconscious, pleasure-seeking drive that has no contact with reality. Its goal is to relieve tension. With Snape, we see both sexual tension and anger as his main drives. The ego is the decision-making branch of personality that's in contact with the real world. It's partly conscious, pre-conscious, and unconscious, meaning it takes in and filters the demands made by the id and superego and balances that with the realistic expectations of the external world. This balancing act often causes anxiety. The superego has no contact with the outside world. It's moralistic, unrealistic, and demands perfection. With Snape, these three components are unbalanced, and he engages in unhealthy defense mechanisms to combat the anxiety of the ego, suppress the impulses of the id, and satisfy the idealistic expectations of his superego. Because of the prejudice of his peers, it wouldn't be considered acceptable for him to love Lily, a Muggleborn, especially while in school, while this age is full of social pressures, a need for belonging and acceptance. And when all of your friends are engaging with and even supportive of this hateful rhetoric towards Muggles, it's pretty reasonable to assume that Snape's affection towards Lily would be seen as extremely undesirable or taboo. He further repressed his love for her when she ended up with James. He never stopped loving her, but he pushed it down, likely to protect himself from the humiliation of being passed over. These feelings don't just disappear, they find ways to slip through and show up as other defense mechanisms. His repressed desire for Lily shows up as anger and cruelty in almost every other facet of his life. He can't hate on Lily directly for not returning his feelings, probably because she died, and he can't be outwardly angry at his friends for shaming his feelings for her. He also can't admit that he loves a Muggleborn. So, he projects by becoming a Death Eater, a group that dehumanizes people like Lily. He can't take his anger out on James for bullying him, or for being the one to end up with Lily. So, when he's a teacher, he takes it out on students. He's essentially a menace to students and terrorizes them over the years. He treats Hermione, an intelligent Muggleborn, much like Lily was, horrifically, and Lily and James's son, Harry, receives the brunt of this anger and mistreatment. Horney's psychoanalytic social theory posits that early childhood experiences and social and cultural conditions are what most significantly shape one's personality, consistent patterns of love and affection being crucial to healthy psychological development. Those who don't receive those things may consequently grow up to suffer from basic anxiety, a repressed hostility that festers into feelings of insecurity, isolation, and insignificance. We don't have chapters and chapters of Snape's upbringing, but we have enough to draw some general conclusions. One example is in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, where Harry is viewing a memory of Snape. In the first half of this memory, Lily asks Snape if things were better at home and if his parents had stopped arguing. A home with conflict and abuse is unpredictable, tense, and likely not an example of consistent, healthy patterns within an interpersonal relationship, and it's probably not satisfying a child's desire for close contact, love, and safety. In the same memory, readers are given a description of a young James Potter, and with that, a comparison of James and Snape that more clearly demonstrates the traumatic environment that Snape grew up in. Quote, "Slight, black-haired like Snape, but with the indefinable air of having been well cared for, even adored, that Snape so conspicuously lacked." End quote. As mentioned at the start of the video, Snape's physical description painted a picture of a child that was often overlooked and forgotten. Because of the lack of warmth and safety in his childhood, Snape likely developed basic anxiety. There are a few protective devices to combat basic anxiety. The first example is submissiveness. This is exhibited by Snape when he joins the Death Eaters. By submitting to a dictator in power and joining him as a follower, this may act as a way to mitigate his feelings of feeling small, isolated, and lonely. Withdrawal is a second. As far as we know, he never maintained any emotionally close relationships besides maybe with Dumbledore, and never sought out another romantic companion after he and Lily stopped being friends. Because if you're independent and emotionally detached, then you can't be hurt by other people. Horney also named another way of combating basic anxiety. Moving away from people is a neurotic way to solve the conflict of isolation. It's demonstrated by an extreme need for privacy, independence, and emotional distance. Even the very nature of Snape being a double agent speaks to this. He's unable to ever truly get close enough lest anyone know his true intentions. Dumbledore is the only other character who knows, and that's less out of closeness on Snape's part as much as it is restitution for getting Lily killed. If Snape maintains the appearance of being okay with being cold and detached, then he protects his stoic reputation. There's a scene in the book where Snape makes Dumbledore swear not to tell anyone of his love for Lily, and Dumbledore's reply is, "My word, Severus, that I shall never reveal the best of you." Humanistic psychology is a perspective that emphasizes looking at people as a whole and seeing the uniqueness of the individual. It's based on the existential assumption that we all have free will. Carl Rogers developed a humanistic theory of personality called person-centered theory. This is the idea that individuals have an innate drive towards self-actualization, growth, and rising to their potential. One subsystem of these self-actualization tendencies is the self-concept. The self-concept is an individual's cumulative, subjective, and perceived experiences that contribute to their overall perceptions of the self. Due to Snape's upbringing in an abusive household, as well as his time at school where he felt ridiculed and isolated, it's likely his concept of self was quite skewed. There's little evidence of unconditional positive regard or love from his peers or family. Due to this, he likely developed a negative self-concept, where he often felt unlovable or unworthy. And without that unconditional acceptance, love, and respect, there was little to no motivation to thrive or to be better than his low self-concept allowed him to be. Lily, who was his first and only source of acceptance and friendship, became central to his identity and sense of self-worth. It's probably a big reason why he was unable to let her go, even in death. And even then, he pushed her away until he was alone again. and this loss of friendship likely only reinforced the negative self-concept that he wasn't good enough. The ideal self is the version of yourself that you wish to be. His ideal self was probably modeled after someone like James, confident, loved, smart, and best of all, the one who got the girl. The discrepancy between his ideal self and his self-concept is large, and this leads to incongruence between who he is and who he wants to be. Incongruence leads to further anxiety and inner conflict. This gap between selves and his desire to be someone worthy of Lily's love is also likely a contributing factor to why he worked so hard after her death to protect her son, even if he did bully him a little bit. This repayment, although guilt-driven, could be seen as an attempt to live up to a better potential and maybe become someone worth choosing. He never becomes self-actualized, finds inner peace or emotional closeness with another, but he does redeem himself, for the most part. In conclusion, this close analysis of Severus Snape should reveal just how complex and conflicted his character is. It's hopefully provided some insight into not just how he sees himself, but why he came to be that way. From a psychoanalytic perspective, hopefully it explained how his childhood trauma and repressed desires manifested itself into defense mechanisms, his guilt, bitterness, and double agency reflecting an ongoing struggle between his desires and his conscience. And from a humanistic perspective, I hope I highlighted the impact of Snape's lack of unconditional positive regard and lasting emotional fallout of childhood neglect, hopefully provided an explanation for his inability to reconcile with who he is and who he wants to be. And although he did redeem himself in the end somewhat and prove himself to be an ally, I still don't know if that entirely excuses a lifetime of tormenting children, and I still think he might have benefited from a little bit of therapy. Thank you for watching my presentation, and thank you for a great semester.